What up, YouTube? It's Frisky Dingo here, getting back with you guys with another reaction/review video. Always remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on this video because we are on a grind. That being said, today's response is looking at Dave Chappelle visiting his old high school. It was actually pretty funny. You know, the responses, you wouldn't expect nothing less, especially from young students of today's generation. Obviously, they understand the detrimental views that Dave Chappelle has that invokes within his comedy. And I think that students protesting is just the right example that Dave Chappelle needs to understand where he's moving forward with his content. A lot of the younger generation, especially people my age, around 28, 18 to 28, don't really identify with transphobia, or that being said, isolating people based on their identity. And that's something that we're experiencing a lot with the older generations now that transgender, bisexual, gay, pan, all these people are coming out, their lifestyles are being normalized. That being said, the older generation is now, because they've never seen it before, they consider it not real or something that just came into new age, which is truly not real. If you ask any transgender, pansexual, bisexual, gay person, they've have had a life since like forever, and people before them, and so on and so forth. So that being said, it doesn't really surprise me at all that Dave Chappelle would get backlash at his school. This is something that's very exponential with young students, especially when you look at the ones that understand either Dave Chappelle or Bill Maher, because, you know, Bill Maher is basically the flip of a coin of Dave Chappelle. The only difference is that he's a white Jewish man that panders to political interest. That being said, I don't really see the difference between either one, so I wasn't surprised when Dave Chappelle received the backlash. Bill Maher just recently received backlash just for speaking down on Greta Thunberg, which is ironic because all Greta does is speak about making the planet better, you know, working towards the climate crisis and fixing a lot of the mistakes that governments have normalized within the last 10 to 20 years. So just to see, you know, Bill Maher, you know, try to attack her and all that and call her, you know, a crazy young person is funny. And that's what you're receiving with the Dave Chappelle situation. A lot of younger people in the generation understand identity, not only sexual identity, but they understand society identity. That being said, it's very obvious for people their age to see the backlash that's happening with Dave Chappelle specials. Not saying that trans people are being hanged and killed in the streets because of Dave Chappelle. What I'm saying is that it does create a notion and or a story to what already exists at this point. A lot of people don't understand transgender people. So when you start bringing in terms like TERF, or you start saying, well, I believe that a woman is a woman, then you're automatically attacking transgender people and their identity. There is no, I love transgender people, but yet at the same time, I'm going to attack them for their identity and say that them transgender woman isn't really a woman. So it's like no different of, you know, being having a white person having a black friend and then using that black friend's identity to back up their racism, and then at the end saying, well, you know, I just don't believe black people are humans. Like, you know, like, just not a thing, but I still respect, love, and represent black people. Like, so obviously that is redundant, asinine to every extent. So to see Dave Chappelle receive the backlash of the kids protesting, and basically one kid brought up saying that the things that he was saying in his special is homophobic and transphobic, and that it does have some type of consequences to the younger generation, in which we understand is true, because the younger generation, they're just molded by the same type of things that exist. For example, for me, it was the same thing when I was growing up. You know, transgender, sexual ambiguity was all a really big thing. You know, this goes back to almost every cartoon I watched, every anime I watched. They were already in the forefront of these shows. So for me, it was very normal 2010 to right now to see transgender and other people, you know, receive their rights and other things like that. Why? Because me being a young person, I've watched and learned from the mediums in which these people were being represented in. You can't watch one anime with there's always a transgender person in anime. There's always some type of cross-gender anime character. If you go back to the classics, Gundam, Cowboy Bebop, Rurouni Kenshin, there's always someone who, either it's a girl who doesn't say she's a girl but identifies in masculinity, or it's a guy who doesn't say he's a guy but identifies with female masculinity, female femininity. The perfect example, once again, Cowboy Bebop, the episode when we were learning about Ed, and when he was on his home planet, everyone kept calling him a girl. He kept saying I was a boy. He met a transgender woman and was confused thinking he was mother, but he was like, I am, but I'm not. Then you have people like in Powerpuff Girls, him. Then you have, Haku from Naruto. Haku was a full boy, looked like a girl, had the femininity of a girl, so on and so forth. So we could give you, plethora of examples of how this exists. That being said, it's understandable that this generation is going to be vocal about these things. Why? Because just as I was growing up taking all these mediums in, they're taking it even in more, because obviously the trend has moved forward. Now you see more gay people, more transgender, more identity people within the media, and I think that's okay. Same thing with the Dave Chappelle situation. I'm happy these students spoke up and said something, because ultimately the things that Dave Chappelle has been doing, people are just taking it with the notion, because older people are the ones that are allowed to express their opinion from this situation. We haven't really heard from the younger generation, and now we're starting to hear and see how they feel about it. And I, just like any regular millennial, they're going to be against what he's saying, simply because a lot of us millennial younger generation people, we've moved away from basically trying to identify people within a box. If you understand what that means, it goes to the same understanding of harassing people for being gay, harassing people for being transgender. A lot of younger people don't really feel the need to do that. Not saying all young generational people experience this and or act like this, but what I'm saying is that there's a bigger concession amongst younger people to give that equality and respect, unlike the older generation, where they grew up with hating gays, hating transgenders, hating cross-dressers. Anything that involves within the realm of any of these things, they were learned to hate that exact thing, and that's a problem which is continuing, right? Dave Chappelle is like 50, almost 60 something years old. He's a part of that generation. He's a person who grew up that was in a generation that normalized homophobia, transphobia, identity phobia, and so on and so forth. So it makes sense that this is going to be his opinion, and it makes sense that students are going to backlash against him, because today's generation doesn't see the reason for these type of things. Especially, when you look back at Barack Obama, when he made gay marriage legal, the whole precedent behind that wasn't the gay men who was locked up in their houses for 20 years and never tried to express themselves. No, it was the young kids who were protesting out there on Pride, out there in 2018, 2009, etc., etc. Those are the people who got that helped get that bill passed. It wasn't the older people. The older people were more satisfied in allowing the status quo to continue. And because Obama was more with younger people, and he understood the grassroots environment of younger people, that was one of the first things he enacted. Why? Because there was such a movement behind it. It wasn't just, one race of people. It was black, white, Asian, because gay people could come in any type of ethnicity and color and race. That being said, that's what ends up happening for our man's Barack Obama. So at the end of the day, we understand that there is some type of precedent that exists, and hopefully Dave Chappelle will learn from his mistakes. That's the only thing I really wish, that he'll end up learning, that not to speak on people so gradually the way he does. I can understand the comedy side of it, but to me, just like many of the other people who protest against it, it's like going up there and using "my friend is black" joke, and just because your friend is black doesn't mean that you're allowed to say these things that are biased against the identity. And that's the biggest problem, right? We wouldn't want someone to go up there and say, oh yeah, my friend's black, so I could say, black people are monkeys and this and that, and black people aren't real. Why do we think they're equal in identity? Because we have to remember there's precedents that are set for that. Remember, back in the day, very much so between the 1900s and the 1980s, which this was identified by Sigmund Freud, that there was a nature in psychology, that there was a subcategory in psychology that tried to say that black people were, and this goes into the folding of Darwinism and identity, that black people were not mentally intelligent, did not have the same brain span as other races, had smaller brains, and more proponent to servitude and all these other things. What do you think they do with transgender people? They do the same exact thing. They try to say transgender people aren't real, it's a mental illness, etc., etc. So we can see all these same rhetorics being passed down. So if you have any opinions or questions or whatever you believe, take the conversation to the comments. Shout out to those kids who protested Dave Chappelle. You should always protest if you believe that someone is creating a narrative that personally hurts others. And as we've seen just in this year alone, 79 transgender people have been killed because of their identity. So, this definitely helps move things forward. So if we hear any more news from Dave Chappelle or his next special, we'll definitely get into the next one.